Researchers publishing this month in the journal Alzheimer's and Dementia followed roughly 1,700 adults for over 2 decades. And the pattern they found is not subtle. Back in the late 1980s, these adults, then averaging 53 years old, answered a simple question as part of a long-running health study called ARIC. How often did they watch television? Never or seldom, sometimes, or very often. 2 decades later, researchers brought the same people in for detailed brain scans. People who had reported watching television very often showed measurably smaller volumes in brain regions tied to memory, planning, and vision, along with more white matter damage. The kind of damage linked to stroke risk and cognitive decline. The effect showed up even after accounting for physical activity, diabetes, weight, and smoking. Before you swear off your evening show forever, or wave this off as another scary headline, let us sort the signal from the noise. Start with where this data actually comes from. ARIC, short for atherosclerosis risk in communities, is a real, long-running study run with federal health research backing, tracking thousands of American adults since the late 1980s specifically to understand cardiovascular and, more recently, brain health over time. This is not a one-off online survey. Participants answered detailed questionnaires about their daily habits, including how often they watched television, categorized simply as never or seldom, sometimes, or very often. Decades later, a subset of roughly 1,700 of those same participants agreed to detailed MRI brain scans, letting researchers compare a habit reported in their 30s and 40s against brain structure in their 50s and 60s. Because it follows the same individuals over time rather than comparing different groups at a single moment. This kind of longitudinal design is one of the stronger tools available for spotting real associations. Though, as you will see shortly, association is not the same word as cause. Get specific about what the scans showed. The adults who reported watching television very often had smaller volumes in brain regions tied to memory formation, along with smaller frontal lobes, the area responsible for planning and decision-making, and smaller occipital lobes, which handle visual processing. They also showed more white matter hyperintensities, small bright spots on an MRI that indicate damage to the brain's wiring. The kind of damage researchers associate with aging blood vessels, higher stroke risk, and a steeper path toward cognitive decline. Notably, the effect was more pronounced in men than in women in this data set. Though researchers have not fully explained why. These are not enormous, catastrophic differences visible to the naked eye. They are statistically measurable volume reductions of the kind that show up when you compare large groups of people carefully, the sort of gradual structural difference that can compound over a lifetime. Here is the detail that makes this study more interesting than a simple sitting is bad for you. Headline: Researchers specifically compared people who sat for long stretches at mentally demanding jobs against people who sat for long stretches watching television. And those two groups did not look the same on the brain scans. People whose sedentary time went toward cognitively engaging work often showed healthier brain patterns than people whose sedentary time went toward passive television viewing. Lead researcher David Richling at the University of Southern California put it simply. Pay attention to what people are doing while they sit, not just how long they sit. That distinction matters because it pushes back against the simple assumption that any prolonged sitting is equally harmful. If the mechanism were purely about physical inactivity, both groups should show similar brain patterns. They did not, which points toward something specific about passive, low engagement screen time rather than sedentary behavior in general. Here is where you need to slow down before rearranging your evenings. This is an observational study, meaning it can show a strong association between heavy TV viewing and smaller brain volumes. But it cannot prove that television watching caused the shrinkage. Reverse causation is a real possibility researchers have to consider. Subtle, early brain changes could make passive activities like television more appealing decades before anyone notices symptoms, meaning the brain difference could partly be a cause of the habit rather than purely a result of it. Television viewing was also self-reported, based on people remembering and estimating their own habits, not tracked with any device, which introduces the normal fuzziness of memory-based data. And there was no baseline brain scan taken back in the 1980s. So researchers are comparing a habit reported decades ago against a single brain snapshot today. Not a before and after picture of the same brain changing over time. Real study, real finding, genuinely uncertain about exactly which direction the arrow points. Quick recap. The ARIC study followed about 1,700 adults for over 20 years and found that those who reported watching television very often in their 30s and 40s had smaller memory, frontal, and visual brain regions, plus more white matter damage in their 50s and 60s, even after accounting for physical activity and other health factors. So, signal or noise? Signal on the association. This is a large, long-running, peer-reviewed study with real statistical controls, not a one-off headline grabber. And the passive versus active sitting comparison strengthens the case that something specific to television, not sitting itself, is involved. Noise creeps in only if you hear this as proof that TV directly shrinks your brain. The honest answer is this is a strong correlation with real open questions about direction and cause still unresolved. The reasonable takeaway: what you do while you sit may matter more than how long you sit. And passive screen time is worth watching. Pun intended. Subscribe for the health headlines everyone is sharing, checked against what the study actually says. Signal from the noise. Every week.